You're listening to The Back 40, the podcast for Ontario farmers, covering topics and issues that matter most to Ontario agriculture. Brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm the host of The Back 40, Mike Brine, agribusiness specialist at Trillium Mutual Insurance. Recently, there has been a lot more in the news about mental health, and certainly with the pandemic, it's been top of mind for many people. We've seen in the farming community that this is starting to become more and more of a topic, and things like Bell's Let's Talk have certainly brought that to the forefront in society as general. We're talking today with Lesley Kelly. Lesley is one of the co-founders of Do More Ag, but she has much more reach than that in the ag community. She is the founder of High Heels and Canola Fields, which is a blog, and so much more. She's been featured on Bell's Let's Talk, and in her spare time, she is also a farmer, a mother, a wife, motivational speaker, a podcast host, and she and her husband, Mark, farm 7,500 acres. Lesley, welcome to the Back 40.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So, High Heels and Canola Fields. That's a really catchy title there. How did that all come about?
Yeah, well, I'm a marketer by trade, and that's what I went to school for and started my career in. And I've always been behind the scenes. And as I was sitting in my office at my marketing job, I wanted to start to share my farm story, my family and our story of how we grew the crops, all the great things that were happening in the industry, as I saw lots of myths being spread. And I thought the best way for me to get some attention from those outside of agriculture would be to have a catchy name. And I came up with High Heels and Canola Fields to bring two worlds together with my city marketing corporate job and then having a life on the farm and then sharing and spreading my love of food and farming.
It's been very successful. You've reached a lot of people with that. Some people might think it's just a blog, but there's so much more to it than that, isn't there?
There is, and it was really, for me, it was almost selfish because with being behind the scenes, I hadn't been in front of the camera or even hadn't wrote much or had taken lots of photos. So with me, it was more of a journey of getting outside my comfort zone. But my ultimate goal was to help my fellow farmers. The seed that was planted for me to ultimately start High Heels and Canola Fields was being in downtown Vancouver. My family and myself, we had a snack food business using barley grown right from the farm. And I recall selling our snack food and people having such amazing questions of having met a farmer before and didn't know what barley was and how to grow barley. But then we also got a lot of criticism. And what really took me aback was a woman who didn't want to even have a conversation with me about using chemicals. She asked if we were a conventional farm, and I said yes, and here's why. And then she stopped me, and I was pregnant at the time, and she looked at my belly and said, if you use chemicals, you are a bad farmer and a bad mother. And that really had me upset because there was such fear in her eyes. And I didn't want others to feel that way. And I also didn't want others to have to go through the conversation like I just had with not knowing even how to answer those questions. And so that for the idea of creating High Heels and Canola Fields was spreading information, but also just love and hope and joy to those both in and outside of agriculture.
It's interesting you talk about that interaction. And I know from personal experience that some people are not interested in listening to what the story is. I had a situation when I was in Hawaii where somebody went up one side of me and down the other over GMOs and not interested in listening to anything that I had to say. And that's really tough. Like when you are in that situation, it's a really tough situation. And to have someone say to you, well, not only are you a bad farmer, but you're a bad mother, that's painful. Those are really cutting words. Do you find that the reaction to your High Heels and Canola Fields though, has been relatively positive over the years.
Yeah, like it's been about 5, 6 years, and I've tried really hard to have a uplifting and engaged community all around supporting each other, lifting each other up, and then supporting agriculture. It's been such an amazing and humbling journey to be, because it's hard to put stuff out there of your opinions and your ideas and then your farm, because every farm is different and we do things for different reasons because of different climate, land, or just even what works. And putting yourself out there is really hard, but it's been such a great experience of the feedback and the support and the love that I've received in return. So I've grown through this process, and so has my community been there. I lost my dad and this past summer, and I was met with such love and support. So my journey has been twofold, and I've gone in different directions, and my community has been there every step of the way with me.
That's awesome to hear. Now, if you go onto the site and you look, there's written blog, there's videos. I like the one where you broke your husband's truck. I have to admit that that one made me smile a lot. And I'd encourage anyone to go on there. And there's lots of information about what you do on the farm and how you farm there. But there's a real theme there that runs through as to mental health. And there's a personal story behind that. Can you fill us in a little bit on that?
Yeah, and really, my story with sharing more about mental health, High Heels, the blog has helped, because what I learned through that blog is conversation matters and your words matter, and how you can impact each other in a positive way really matters. So, behind the scenes of through High Heels and Canola Fields, my family and myself, we were going through some really hard times. And after I had our second boy, Copeland, I suffered through postpartum depression. I had baby blues and I didn't know what was going on, really. It was a hard pregnancy with Copeland. It was very different than my first with Jennings, but with Copeland, in a matter of the first ultrasound, we were told that he had a high chance of having Down syndrome. Every ultrasound, they found heart spots and lung spots. So every time I went into a doctor's appointment, almost had a panic attack. It was a very high extreme anxiety. And then once Copeland was born, he was healthy, was amazing. But afterwards, the sleep deprivation set in. And I found myself upstairs trying to have a nap or trying to go to sleep and then not being able to, and then just crying. And my husband came in, he found me crying uncontrollably in our master bath, and really helped me get what I was feeling, that weight of the world off of my shoulders. And then through that, helped support me in those following days and weeks. And then shortly thereafter, because we were raising a young family, we were living in Regina, and he was commuting to our farm, which was a 4-hour round trip. And then we were in the midst of succession planning, but then the rain came. We were flooded out of hundreds of acres, and our farm went into financial hardship. My husband started to have panic attacks. And with that, we started to have more conversations of mental health. I recall coming home from work one day, and he was having a panic attack in our living room. And I thought he was dying. He thought he was dying. It was the hardest thing to watch someone that you love go through such a hard time. And I recall after the panic attack was over, we sat on our kitchen floor and said, we have to do things differently in our farm and in our family. And from then on, we put mental health on the agenda as a priority within the farm and within the family. So I left my career and we moved to the farm full time, and we changed our culture on the farm by sitting down and talking of how we wanted to communicate, how we wanted to talk to each other, and what we envisioned the success of the farm.
Those conversations, for whatever reason, they don't seem to happen on a lot of farms. They don't seem to happen with a lot of farmers. We have that reputation of the stoic and whatever will happen, and we just put up with it. But this has got to be more prevalent in the industry than what we've seen. What's the reason behind farmers not reaching out for help and trying to hide all of these problems without having these conversations?
Yeah, we were one of them. We didn't talk about mental health for a variety of reasons. I remember just sitting down after those panic attacks and even not anyone knowing. We didn't really share with our friends. Our friends didn't know, and most of our family didn't know, just within our close family knit circle, because there was that fear for us of what would people think? And would they treat us differently? Would we lose friends? And I remember when Matt and I, we shared a video of our mental health journey or our stories and thinking of what would the risk be if others knew? And there was that personal side. What would our community think of us? And then what really took us back, or was that punch in the stomach of, could this impact the farm? What would our insurance think? Would we lose our insurance? And what would the bank think? Would we lose our operating line of credit if they heard that we were suffering from mental illnesses? And then what really hurt was, would people tell our landlords, because we rent about 50% of our land, would people go and tell our landlords that we're crazy? And would our rented land be gone? And we thought, wow, there's that stigma and the fear of why we might not share. And it's so deeply rooted, not only just personal, but within our farm too. And then for us within our family, we didn't talk about it because we didn't know how. I didn't know what anxiety looked like. I didn't know what baby blues felt like. And then I also didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't know how to support someone. I was always afraid that if I asked questions, how would it be received? Would I upset them more, or would it make the situation worse? And from what I've learned in all of that through this journey is that none of those things happened. There were times where the conversations took a left-hand turn and we had to take a time out and say, hey, let's do a do-over. That I could have asked that question differently, but for us it was baby steps and just the journey of learning about our mental health and learning about each other and knowing that these conversations can be life-changing and life-saving.
You talked about all your fears about what could happen. What actually did happen, though, when you came out and told people about what was going on?
Yeah, it was absolutely the opposite. Our goal with sharing our video, because we thought we can't be the only ones going through this. There's got to be, unfortunately, there has to be more that have gone through such hard times and have faced struggles like this. And so we shared that video, and Matt was very open with dealing with farm stress and his panic attacks and his anxiety and the things that have helped us. And then afterwards, for him, it was more therapeutic because no one knew. So he felt the weight of the world off of his shoulders. And for once, he said he could sleep. And then the messages started to come, emails and text messages and phone calls and direct messages of people saying, hey, yeah, me too. And we've been through this. So people were sharing their story with us. And then people also said, I thought I was alone, and here's what helped me. And then also other people said, that helped so much because I felt alone. So for us, if our goal was if one person watched it and it helped them, that would be amazing. But the amount of messages we received from people who had been through hardships or who were going through hardships was nothing that we had ever anticipated.
And a lot of the negative consequences that you're worried about, the insurance, the banking, and all of that, that wasn't a problem either.
Yeah, it was the opposite too. Our bank actually was one of the first people that messaged us and sent us a card and saying, we see this every day. And thank you for starting this conversation. And it was for us, there was lots of emotions. It was the knowing that we weren't alone, the feeling like we were part of a community, but then also heartbreak because for us, it was the question of why has it taken this long for us to talk about this? And heartbreak for knowing of all the farmers and those within agriculture that we've lost because we weren't having these important conversations.
Yes, and we all know them within our own communities. We can go down the list and we know the ones that we've lost because of the stresses that just get to be too much. Is your organization in need of funding? Trillium's Roots Community Fund is currently looking to provide money to projects for organizations in Ontario that are agriculturally focused. Applications are now being accepted for Ontario projects, including facilities or equipment upgrades, funding for research, innovation, and much more. To learn more about Roots, including how to apply, Visit our website at trilliummutual.com and click Community at the top of the page. Now, sharing that video and sharing your story is one thing, but you took that a step further. Tell us about the genesis of Do More Ag.
So I posted that video because my girlfriend and fellow farmer from Saskatchewan, Kim Keller, she had put out a tweet on social media, on Twitter, and her message was asking the farm community to do more around suicide. That farm stress is real and suicide is real, because she had received a message from someone who was looking for resources. The farmer had died by suicide, and the family was looking for resources, and she couldn't find any, or it was very hard for her to find those resources. So she put out that tweet, and my husband, he's not on social media, but we were watching that conversation unfold, and we were driving. It was just after our anniversary, and we were driving to town, and we thought, people are saying, yes, we should talk about it, and let's talk a bit, and mental health is important, and let's start talking. But we thought, but we're still not really talking about it. So we thought, let's share. And so we Googled farmer sharing mental health story, and we couldn't find anything. And so we thought, well, there's reasons why, but let's help this conversation. And after the messages and the amount of people who said, yeah, me too, and I thought I was alone, and now I know I'm not alone, myself, Kim Keller, and a couple other individuals sat down, and we thought, let's start to help our farmers. And we realized that there was no other mental health organization out there in Canada who was dedicated to helping farmers with their mental health. So we created Do More Agriculture. And that was 4 years ago. And since our launch 4 years ago, the support from the industry, farmers at the industry level, business, companies, associations, the government, the support has been immense and just absolutely amazing with helping our agriculture community.
So you say do more ag for more resources. What sort of resources do you get farmers in touch with? What sort of services do you offer?
Yeah, we have three priorities or three pillars that we focus on. The first one is creating awareness about mental health and what it is, what being healthy looks like, what mental wellness is all about. The second one is building community around mental health. So our farmers and those within agriculture can feel that they can raise their hands and say, hey, yeah, me too, I'm going through a hard time. So building that safe and open community to talk and receive support. And then the third is all focused around resources. So that focuses around bringing resources to agriculture that are already out there or that already exist. We have a hub of resources on our website that people can go to find local and regional and provincial resources. And then the second within that is building resources that when there is a gap. So we offer a workshop. It's almost like a mini mental health first aid, a 4-hour workshop that it's called Talk, Ask, Listen, that builds confidence and awareness around mental health and how to support yourself and others around you. And then we also have Ag Culture, and that helps more focused on mental health professionals. Know and understand the culture within agriculture and what a day in the life of the farmer is like, so they can help build a therapeutic relationship when a farmer goes to them for support. And now we're also gearing towards building awareness and support around Ag Talk. And that would be a support and crisis line to help farmers and those within agriculture, because we know that crisis help and ongoing support is so needed. And we're fundraising for that right now.
That's awesome. That is something that, did you ever think when you started that it would grow into what it has become?
No, when we first started Do More Ag, I didn't even know there was mental health first aid training out there. And I remember getting the phone call saying, did you know that this exists? And I thought, no. And part of me was, well, let's bring that to agriculture. And the second was, how can I get my farm and my family signed up to take this? And sitting down and taking a course that focused just on mental health and to do it with my family was one of those life-changing experiences. So to look back and think standing on a stage in front of 2,000 people and launch a mental health organization where at the time when we first started talking about mental health, we received lots of amazing feedback and support, but we also were on the receiving end of not so great comments and feedback too. So to get the support from our industry at such an immense level and to see the conversation and the help and the awareness and the support continue on and be at the place where we are today, where I'm seeing mental health conversations happen at the boardroom table and at events and at the kitchen table, has been such an awesome experience.
I think that part of the issue that farmers run into is we tend to be very solitary at times, where you spend a lot of hours in a tractor, you spend a lot of hours by yourself. And I know that for myself, when I was farming full time, I could go a couple of weeks and never ever basically see anybody other than just my family because I was never off the farm. There's got to be things, though, that as individuals we can do to help. And part of that, of course, is how do we recognize when somebody is having problems? What are some of the warning signs?
Well, for individuals, all warning signs might be different based on the struggle or the illness that you're going through, and it's all individualized. So for us, like the biggest thing that I learned was some of the warning signs that I saw my husband and my brother and my family go through were is that they were outside of their normal. And everyone's normal is different, but I started to see them react differently. I started to see them, do things outside of what I would say they would typically do. So for my husband, he stopped eating, he stopped sleeping. I saw him be more irritable. Usually things that wouldn't irritate him or get him angry or upset were, and very, and quite at a progressive rate. And I saw him when he was going through his high or extreme anxiety, was get into a tractor and be so overwhelmed with racing thoughts and what was going through in his mind that he couldn't even start the tractor. And then for me, I was very, very upset, and I'm very extroverted. And for me to not text friends back, take phone calls, go outside, meet friends, go for walks, that was outside of my normal. And that's where we started to say, hey, see these signs. And that's when we started to have more conversations about mental health. So everyone's normal is different, but the three things that I look for is when it's long lasting. So those signs and symptoms are outside of the 2 weeks, give or take. When they are extreme or vary. And then also when they start to impact your relationships or your job duties, your responsibilities, that's when you can start to take note of those signs and symptoms.
Now, your journey there, you talked about your husband and you talked about yourself. It's always easier to see problems in someone else than it is to see them in ourselves, I think. At what point did you realize that your husband was struggling?
When he started to have panic attacks, and that for me was the hardest experience because I recall one of his first panic attacks. I didn't know what was happening. And all I thought of doing, this was before mental health first aid, before taking it, was to hold on onto him so tightly to get him to focus on my breath and to slow his breathing down. And then to take off his shirt and get him to lay on the tile floor to cool him down. And for me, that was the pivotal moment where we knew things were were bad and were hard. I always thought I was a great supporter, but now going through that and sitting with him on the kitchen floor and asking him the questions of what do you need and how I can help and just go through that with him. That was our pivotal moment when we really needed extra and different help and we needed to prioritize our mental health.
If you were to go back and do it again, though, would you see it with the training that you've had, with the experience that you've had? Do you think you'd have seen the signs sooner?
I don't know if I would have seen the signs sooner, but I would have supported him differently. From now learning about his anxiety, he's had it his whole life, but in previous jobs or occupations, it fueled him. It got him to accomplish the tasks in the day, and it was positive anxiety. Where it started to become just overwhelming was the additional financial pressures and that farm stress. And for me, what I would say to him, and now looking back, it's had a negative impact. I would say things like just sleep it off, or tomorrow will be better, or at least it's not this, or it could be worse. It could be this, or, it's really not that bad. But thinking I was being helpful, I was being encouraging. And now looking back, it was not as helpful or positive in how he interpreted it. So I would have supported him much, much differently. And we would have sat down earlier because I also didn't know how to talk about mental health. So I didn't talk about it. So I would have asked those questions of what support looks like, how I could support, what we could do differently, what he needs. And at the time when we were asking those questions, he didn't know what he needed. So it was just the exploration of what that support and what that help looked like.
You talk about that conversation. How do we go about starting that conversation? 'Cause I know for myself, that would be one of the hardest things to do would be to approach someone and say, hey, things don't look like they're all right. What's going on? How do you bring that up with someone?
Yeah, and that was something that I've learned too. Well, just like how your signs and symptoms might be different with mental health, so is approaching this conversation. But the best that I've learned is you come at it with an open heart and love and positive intent. And that could be the best for someone. So for me, it's just starting with recognizing those signs and symptoms and letting them know that you love them and that you care for them and that you're there for them. And if there is anything that they need, or sometimes for us on the farm, it's, hey, this looks like it's been bothering you. Do you want to go for a drive? That could be just an opening intro to sitting with someone. And sometimes it's asking, is everything all right? Are you okay? And then being there for them in a way where you're listening. I always thought that I had to know the answers or know advice or know all the resources out there. And sometimes that's not what someone needs. It's just letting them know that you love them and that you care for them and that you're there for them and you can sit with them and hold them in that space and then listen to what they're going through, and that can sometimes be the most life-changing conversation for someone.
You talk about resources, and people may not know where to go to find them, but two really good resources. Great chance to find out more information from either Do More Ag or High Heels and Canola Fields. How can people find that information?
Yeah, you can go to the website at domore.ag. There's a variety of resources there. So we have support resources where you can go and locate a mental health professional or crisis lines based on where you live or what you're looking for. We offer workshops, and there's more information on the website there, but also just wellness tips and information on how to help support someone, what mental illness looks like, all about mental health. So domore.ag, and then I share more of our story, my farm story, my family story at High Heels and Canola Fields across social media and on the website.
That's awesome. I would highly recommend that if you do not follow the blog and the videos that you put out on High Heels and Canola Fields, I'd highly recommend that you check that out. There are terrific stories there, both in written form and in the videos as well. Lesley, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today on the Back 40.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to The Back 40, brought to you by Trillium Mutual Insurance. Be sure to subscribe to The Back 40 wherever you find your favorite podcasts so that you don't miss an episode. The Back 40, bringing the ag community together one podcast at a time. I'm Mike Brine. Until next time, take care and stay safe. You've been listening to The Back 40. Join us next time when our guest will be Scott Shearer from Ohio State University. Scott is the chair of the Agricultural Engineering Department there, and we'll be talking about some of the things we may see in the fields down the road in agriculture. That's next time on The Back 40.